I'm Stephen Price.
Hello, I'm Cara Githens.
This is The Innkeepers, a podcast by Sanctuary Inn. At Sanctuary Inn, we believe we are called to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers.
On this podcast, we will be interviewing guests who have much to teach us about the many facets of missionary care. Let's learn together and be encouraged to press on in the work God has given each one of us to do.
Hi, this is Steve.
Hello, this is Cara.
And we'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Innkeepers podcast.
Yes, welcome. We are so glad you're here today, and we are excited that we get to interview Dan Abbott today. He is our development director here at Sanctuary Inn, and we will be talking with him about fundraising. He and his wife, Anna, are the parents of 3 sons. Dan comes from a YWAM ministry background, and he enjoys teaching and preaching, and he graduated from Western Seminary with a master's in Biblical Studies and Theology.
And he enjoys mountain climbing.
Yes, he does.
And we've all, he's been able to do a lot of that in the Northwest, so that's been fun. And Dan is our development director, but I'm hoping in the not too distant future that you're going to have a chance to hear from more of our team as well on the area of hospitality. But we're excited to get going on this conversation with Dan today about development.
Yeah, we hope you enjoy.
Well, today on the Innkeepers podcast, we have the opportunity to interview Dan Abbott. Dan is our Director of Development here at Sanctuary Inn. And Dan, welcome to the podcast. We'd just like you to start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little of your story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here in the studio at Sanctuary Inn, of course. And a little of my story. Starting back on the East Coast where I grew up, at least most of my life anyways, I found myself going to church at a young age, and I loved going to Sunday school class. I loved hearing Bible stories. As I got older, I found myself drifting away, though, from the church, from God, doing my own thing, middle school, high school. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until about college when I ended up going to a business school.
Okay.
And I graduated with an associate's degree. And afterwards, I was trying to kind of figure out, okay, what's next in my life? And so it seemed that God had put somebody in my path to tell me a bit about YWAM, right? Youth with a Mission, and what it was that their daughter had been doing in New Zealand on what they call discipleship training school. And she said, you know what, you could do something like this. And I thought to myself, I don't know if that's such a good idea. But at the same time, I knew I wanted to kind of get out of my situation. I knew that I needed to, I guess in a sense, get closer to God, but I didn't know how to do that. And so she said, all you have to do is raise support, and you can just head on over to YWAM in New Zealand. And I was like, what? I've never raised support before. So she kind of coached me a little bit, talking to people, writing letters. And I ended up being able to raise over $7,000 to go on this trip that I knew that they would be talking about God during the week. Mm-hmm. But what I was told is that you would do fun things on the weekend. And so I thought, okay, I've done the Sunday school thing, so why not head on over? So while I was there, I ended up falling in love with Jesus. I just felt like the Holy Spirit just moved in such a way that really brought me to the realization that you could have a personal relationship with God. Before this, he just seemed very far away, distant, not someone that you could communicate with. But now I could actually talk to God. He could talk back to me, and we were doing life together. And so being saved in that missions environment, I was really geared towards missions. And so I stayed on with YWAM for about five years, on and off, focused on church planting amongst unreached people groups out in Brazil, Mozambique, and mainly stationed in South Africa for about 2.5 years or so. And I would come back and forth, to talk to people about what it was I was doing, continue raising support, and then heading back out again. And at some point on the mission field, I really felt like God called me back to finish that business degree. And I wasn't sure if it was business per se, or I felt more so that I might end up doing some higher education, Bible education, maybe master's in divinity, something of that sort. So I came back, finished the degree, and something that God has always done is he's always put men and women in my life that have been able to help me with direction of where it is next steps. And
that mentoring role.
Yeah, it's been really good. And so there was a guy who was an insurance guy. He was selling insurance, and he was mentoring me at the same time. And he was saying, "Hey, listen, if you're going to make money, you need to know what to do with money." And so he started me on the study about stewardship through the Bible. And so I found myself studying to get my insurance license, and at the same time studying stewardship in the Bible. And I thought, man, I do not like studying to get my insurance license, but I'm loving studying the Bible. And so I pretty much closed the insurance book and started looking up seminaries. And I had visited Oregon in the past. One of my best friends lives in Salem. And so I was like, you know what, maybe there's a seminary in Oregon. And so I packed my bag up, moved about 3 months later to Portland, Oregon. And that's actually where I met Steve for the first time. And then I met my wife, which then I ended up staying in Oregon, graduating from Western Seminary, not with a master's in divinity, but an MA in Biblical Studies and Theology. And so we bounced some ideas around of what it is we want to do as a family. And so we stepped into short-term missions. We were in Israel for 3 months, helping pastor an international church out there. And then also went to Mongolia, which we did have a rough experience in Mongolia. Our son got super sick. He was only about 18 months maybe at the time, lost about 10 pounds. A lot of team dynamics type things. And it was really a short-term trip that was supposed to be 3 months that only lasted about 6 weeks. Yeah. So we ended up coming home early, and it would have been great to have a place like Sanctuary Inn around at that point, but it was in the making, right? Yeah. And so it wasn't long. It was about 3 months later, I think, that we got a phone call from Steve. And Steve said, "Hey, listen, we just, Sanctuary Inn just purchased the property up in Welch's. And we had actually been out here for one of the tours just before we left to go to Mongolia. And so, we thought about it, prayed about it, and said, you know what? I think what we can do is we can volunteer for a year." And at that point, we were just bouncing around from
famous, yeah.
So we would go from one place to the other, kind of wherever it was that God led. And then when we got here, there was a lot to be done, but I really fell into the development role. And another thing that God did is He put people around us to be able to really show us how it is that you should be doing development, how it is you should be doing fundraising. And so through friends of the family, we got connected in with the Murdoch Trust and the Focus Group, who helped us with the training, the Essentials of Development training, which really brought us into perspective that fundraising is ministry and fundraising is all about relationship. And that was really eye-opening for me. And then along with that, Mission Increase, which is all around the United States, but there's one right here in Portland, Oregon. And they really gave us an understanding of that biblical perspective of fundraising, how God views money, and the fact that there is more than enough, that we don't have to have that scarcity mentality of like, oh no, we're never going to be able to raise this, or how are we going to do this? Yeah. And then also something that was really impactful was a book by Henry Nouwen called The Spirituality of Fundraising. And I would say, in its simplest form, fundraising is inviting people into the mission and vision that God has given to you or to an organization, whatever it may be. That it's not about me, it's about God and what it is that He's doing. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. So you've talked about the insurance men in Connecticut that helped kind of disciple you with a little bit, some ideas about money, and the exposure with Murdoch and Mission Increase and so on. Are there some other experiences that kind of help you build a framework for looking at the whole fundraising issue?
Well, I mean, I would say in general, just looking at the Bible and understanding what it is that God is saying about our resources and about stewarding not only the resources, but the relationships that He's given us. I mean, you've seen it in the Bible, creating Adam and Eve, relationship to God, relationship with each other, relationship with those around you. And that is a huge thing when it comes to raising support and gathering people to that vision. There's a great passage in Exodus 35 through 36. Now, this is when Moses is gathering all the Israelites together, and they're going to build the tabernacle, right? God's command is to build this tabernacle in order that He may dwell, right? Be with His people, be in relationship with His people more closer than ever before at that point. And what happens is that Moses is calling people forward to give towards this project, right? Towards building the tabernacle. God has this great vision of building this tabernacle, dwelling amongst his people. And he asked everyone who was willing is to bring to the Lord an offering that talks about gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen. And then he says, also, along with that, all who are skilled among you are to come and make everything the Lord has commanded you. And I love it because it's the fact that you need both, right? You need people that are doing this work of building the tabernacle, but just because you have people building it, you still need the resources as well.
Yeah.
And something that's incredible is that God could just make the tabernacle, right? He made heaven, he had dust. I mean, he can do anything, but he wants to bring people alongside of him in what he's doing. And that really correlates well when it comes to raising funds, especially, you know, as a missionary, as an organization, that you want more people involved in what it is, not that you're doing per se, but what it is that God's doing in the place that you're going. And when people start catching that vision, they really want to, they're willing. It even says in verse 21, it says, whose heart moved them to give. They kind of catch on that vision. And later on, it's pretty funny. The skilled workers have to come to Moses and say, hey, we have too much stuff. Yeah. People are getting up every morning. It says morning after morning, they're coming and giving their resources to build the tabernacle because they're so excited about what God is doing. It says we had to restrain the people from giving more. And I know people are probably thinking like, well, I don't have that problem. I'm going to say, oh, no. But over time, as even as we've seen in Sanctuary Inn, you know, it starts with a handful of people, and then it continues to grow as people catch that vision of, you know, not what it is that we're doing, but what it is that God is doing.
Yeah. That's a great perspective to have, that we get to invite people into a partnership with us and with God in our ministries. It's not about us and just we're alone in the calling, but we're inviting people to join in with us as they support us financially.
Right.
That's huge. What would you say are some of the challenges that missionaries are facing when it comes to fundraising these days?
Well, you know, I can't say that there's just one or two. I mean, I think there's a multitude of different things depending on the people, depending on their personality, depending on perspective. I mean, I think sometimes that you can think, oh, I have to raise money. Does that mean I'm begging for money?
Yeah.
Whereas then it's more so if you're understanding it well, then you're inviting people. You're not begging, you're inviting people to be a part of what it is that God is doing. And then some of the barriers can be the fact of how much somebody needs to raise, right? Or what are they raising the funds for, right? Are you going to an unreached people group in Africa, or are you going to be doing administration for an organization?
Yeah.
And I find though what's really key in that is looking for people that are excited about what it is that you're doing. You're not trying to like, you know, get every single person involved in what's going on or even to convince people.
Yeah.
But as you're building relationships with people, you kind of catch an ear for like, oh yeah, that's something that I think that they might want to support. They might want to support us going overseas to this particular area. But yeah, I think it's a lot of times a barrier could be the type of training that somebody gets. You know, how do you do fundraising? Is it just like a 2-week, you know, seminar and then you're sent on your way? Are you able to have somebody that coaches you through it, that comes alongside of you? Because I think a lot of times when it comes to fundraising, you can feel alone in the process. And when it's really supposed to be a team of people that's helping out with the fundraising.
Well, and some people say, well, I'm so quiet, I'm so introverted, I can't really get up and ask people for money. So how would you talk to someone about that?
Well, I would quietly sit them down and I would say that this is part of ministry wherever it is that you're going. And so it's that time of prayer to say, all right, God, you know what, this is hard for me, but you know, with you, I can do this. And then also again, like creating that team of people. There's plenty of people that may not have that particular insecurity in a sense, or just not wanting to ask, but can come alongside you and help you and say, hey, let's do this together. And I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I also think as people who raise support, you're gathering prayer support as well as financial support.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there are people who go out and do ministries or service, humanitarian service, and do it out of their own pocket, but they do it alone rather than with a team with them. And I think it's a different perspective when you have a team behind you, praying for you, supporting you.
Yeah.
That right. changes things.
Yeah. And then even kind of touching on what you're saying about, prayer support, financial support, it seems that it's easier for people to ask for prayer support than it is for financial support. But both of them are just as important and is a part of ministry. And that's why understanding that fundraising is ministry as you develop that relationship, as you are asking people to come alongside of what it is that God is doing. It's asking people to step out in faith as well, asking people to catch the vision as well. And it is just as important to bring those people alongside you as it is for prayer support.
Yeah. And I know as you gather a prayer team, then they can be praying with you about the support, and they can be part of that team that encourages you and helps you along the way too.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the ways that you have found helpful to get through? You mentioned getting a team of people, but are there other resources or trainings or things that you would say, hey, this will help people get through some of these barriers?
I think it's finding people that can come alongside you in that. I mean, there's workshops, like I mentioned, even through like the Essentials of Development, the Mission Increase Foundation. There's so many materials out there that can help you, but yet at the same time, you don't want to be alone in it. And so even with us, we've had different types of development teams, but even as we have the staff here to help us out, and obviously this is an organization, but even asking churches that are supporting you and say, hey, I need help with this in this area, can you help me out? And I think that as you're building those relationships, you can find those people to be able to do that.
Yeah, there are people out there who love doing development and or managing money and things like that. It's not me, but there are people out there, and people need to find them, find their band of brothers kind of thing.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
to find that. There. They really are there.
Yeah, to find that coach or someone that can help them. So some people just think, if I could just find that one big donor, he'll just write that check and then I'll just be done. But that's not a great idea, is it?
Right. Yeah. So I've been in that situation, and I think honestly, when we were first here at Sanctuary 5 years ago, we thought, what if we just found one person to give $1 million, and then we could do all of this stuff, right? And then when we look back on it, like think about all the hundreds of people that have been involved, all the volunteers that have been involved, all the people that have been praying, those that have been giving. I mean, to think about the relationships that we've built over these last 5 years, like we would have missed out on all of that. And then where would we be? I mean, we might have a nice building,
nice facility,
but then there's no way to even provide for or have the resources to do that. So it's really important that you're not going after that one person, but you are going after more than one. And I think that it's different for each missionary, right? Some people are going to have 60 people that are supporting them. Some have 20. It just kind of depends, but you're building that team of people. And also along with that, I just wanted to even address those that do give to missionaries and the importance of keeping up in relationship with that it's not just about like giving the check each month and then they do the work, but as you are also responsible for building that relationship, getting to know them, seeing what their needs are, and so that way you can invest in them, not just financially, but you can give you can give care packages, you can send emails, you can give a phone call, something that encourages them as well, because you're even as you write that check, now you're in. And I think that people don't realize that part of it.
I think Scripture talks about your heart is where your money is in many ways. And so when we give, our heart hopefully gets captured as well into the mission and the ministry. And I know that people that we support, I pay attention way more to what they're doing and what they're about. And I think if that level of investment, when you give, you can really participate in deeper. It can be really meaningful to the missionary.
You've touched a little bit on the area of building relationships with donors. So kind of talk a little bit about how you don't want to stalk someone just for their money, right? I mean, you want to build that relationship. I mean, because the gift is going to come out of the relationship. And if someone feels like they're just being stalked, they're not going to be excited about giving.
Right. And I think that's kind of a big difference between like a transactional way of doing fundraising and then a relational way of doing fundraising. The transactional way would be like, okay, Steve, I know that you have some money and I need it. And so I'm going to say, hey, Steve, you should give to this thing.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of it. That's how the relation. I might say,
Right.
hey, thanks for giving.
Right.
But the next time we talk is probably going to be another transactional conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas relationship, you're getting to know people not just for them to give money, but to get to know them, to see if this is something that they might be interested in.
Right.
And if they're not, that's fine. But
Right.
if they are, then you can say, hey, you know what? We're doing missionary care over here. Or, hey, I'm serving in this particular area, and you mentioned that you just have a heart for that same area. Would you consider supporting me? And and then you can even build on that relationship. And I feel like it's a different, it's kind of like two-way in a sense, whereas you have people that give, and then you start building that relationship more further and forward, because we're responsible for stewarding that relationship. In my mind, if someone gives and then they're like on this like the list of givers, supporters to Sanctuary Inn, I'm responsible for them in a sense of stewarding that relationship. I don't want them to just give money to Sanctuary Inn. I want to get to know them. I want to go deeper with them. And we have found that doing relational fundraising is so fruitful in the sense where you can really invest in someone's life. We've had people call and say, hey, can you pray for this thing? This is what's going on in my life. Do you have any resources in this particular area?
Yeah.
And it's been so good. So it's so much fuller when you're doing fundraising relationally rather than transactionally.
It's a two-way street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some different models of how people raise support. Can you explain what some of the different models are out there in terms of...
Do you mean like in terms of like events or in terms of...
Well, some people choose to be more upfront with asking. Some people choose not to share what their support needs are. I mean, there's just some different approaches. Have you run across some of those different approaches?
Yeah, it's there's definitely a variety of approaches. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people might say something like, well, hey, God will provide, and so then I will wait, for God to provide. Maybe one day I'll open up my mailbox and God will give me the money I need to go over there, right? That's like an extreme.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that it's really important to have faith, but to ask. And in my opinion, in my experience, that it's really important to have that face-to-face ask. And so there's always a time for sending out letters. There's always a time for newsletters, right? We do newsletters. We want people to know what's going on. But specifically to ask something for a financial gift, I like to really ask them face-to-face in person is more of an approach that I would take. We've also we do events. Events is one thing when it comes to, thinking about raising missionary support, having smaller events, what we call Mission Increase. The organization I mentioned talks about micro events. And so you can have small groups where you can still have that personal relationship with them more so than like a huge dinner of some sort. And then, then you go back and do the follow-up.
Like a Bible study group could be a group that you could address as a missionary. You could try to tap into, in local churches and
right. And plus like Bible
settings.
study groups, you have a relationship with them already. And then as you build are there, asking people like, oh, are there other people that would be interested in this? And so, you're able to then be able to talk to them as well.
Yeah.
Well, you've talked a lot about relational support raising, which is very much kind of how you go about things and developing relationships with people. Are there some other things that kind of, you would describe as more of your philosophy of fundraising?
My philosophy of fundraising, huh? That's an interesting question. I think that it's really important to be prayerful in what it is that you're doing, that really God is in it. And I think that you can get overwhelmed, like I said, with the amount of money that you need to raise for a particular cause or, to go out on to the mission field. But God is the one that is calling you to it. And therefore God is the one that's going to provide. But even as we said, he's going to use people to provide and to be able to reach that mission or vision that he's given to you. And so it's really prayerfully considering and asking God, okay, who is it that you want me to talk to? Are there different ways that I can go about this? Is there a church that I can talk to? And even as you know, just even as you're praying for other things in life, like things pop up that are like, oh wait, hey, you know what? So-and-so did mention that, you know, and we become more in tune to what it is that God is doing and how it is that he's leading us and directing us. And I think that it's really important to also have a plan. Sometimes a plan's like, oh, people are like, oh, a plan, you know, but oh, what about, you know, man plans his way, but the Lord directs, right? But a man plans his way.
Right.
And as we kind of assess the plan and we listen and are in tune to what God is saying, then we are more geared to understanding where it is that he is leading us. And I even think about going back to when we began the 7-7 project, right? It was December 2019, and we felt that God was leading us to start paying off the loans for the property. And we were like, okay, let's do this, you know? And so by faith, we gave payments to both organizations that we owed money to. And it seemed that it was exactly what God wanted us to do. And then in 2020, right, COVID hits, and we kind of put on the brakes and say, okay, wait a minute. Is this really what you're doing? Is this what you want to do right now with everything going on? And that's when, you know, Jonathan Gothier, one of our board members, said, hey, you know what? After talking to you, I really feel like God was pressing on me that we should do something like this. Like, what if people gave $77 to the project? And, you know, looking back on it, like, that's amazing. Like, we thought that, oh, hey, maybe we didn't hear, you know, in my side of things. And I think that you can have doubts and like, oh, did I really hear you, Lord? Right. And that's going to happen all the time through life. And it's good to stop. And it's good to ask God, like, where it is that we're still headed, right? And then out of that, right, we're looking now, we only owe about $120,000. I mean, it's been incredible to see the amount of people that have gotten involved in that. But it's through that prayer, it's through that discerning, it's through that gaining wisdom from other people to be able to know what those next steps are.
Yeah, but we had a plan in that we set a goal and we communicated that goal and we started telling people about it, even though it kind of looked like a sketchy time to do it. And yeah,
sometimes it's stepping out in faith doesn't always necessarily make sense in any area of life, right? And then when it comes to raising support, it's like, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. And it's all you, God, at this point. And a lot of times I look back and I'm like, I don't even know how that particular thing happened. You know, surprise gifts that come in. And you're like, I had nothing to do with that. That was obviously God.
Yeah. God put it on someone's heart.
Yeah.
I know in our family, we've had two very different fundraising experiences, support raising experiences. The first time we went overseas, or when we went overseas, sorry, the process was long. But at the same time, it wasn't just about raising support. It's never just about raising support. It's about what is God doing in my heart during this time. Because the money is inconsequential to God. He doesn't care. The money's there. He'll make it available when you need it. But for us, there were things and concerns that as a couple and as a family, we needed to address. And it took almost 3 years to raise the support that, you know, someone said, oh, this will take you 24 months. Well, not quite. But it did take longer. Then the next time when we started a ministry in Southeast Portland, the amount that we were asked to raise, and it just was felt like a tidal wave. It was just, that money came in like 3 months. The money we had to raise was like in 3 months. And it was like, wow, that's ridiculous. That's crazy how that happened. But yeah, it's not just the money. It's God doing something in your heart.
Right.
It's God doing something on that journey. And I think missionaries can get so frustrated, like, oh, I just can't raise the support. But it's like, well, but what's the bigger picture? What's the journey you're on? What's God doing in you and in your family?
Right. Yeah, it's a lot about the process, right? I think a lot of times you get the call to go to the field, and it's like, okay, I'll just pack my bag and leave.
I'll go tomorrow.
Right? Tomorrow. I mean,
tomorrow,
God wants me there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times too, it's that God is also very God wants to do a work in you through the process of getting you out there onto the field. And I think that's pretty cool. And money is not necessarily a deterrent from you getting to the field, but a part of the process in which God uses so that he can, fine tune you. So you're even, more equipped when you go out.
For sure. And nothing's wasted.
Nothing's wasted. No. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you be willing to share some of the resources and tools and things that you have kind of gathered as you have gone about this learning journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I have 3 books that I would highly recommend when it comes to just even understanding resources, finances, kingdom perspective of resources, and how it is that God views those resources. I mentioned already Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. It's just a great understanding that fundraising is ministry, that it's all about relationship. And when you realize that it's all about relationship, it kind of takes the pressure off. I felt. And this was actually the first book I ever read on fundraising, and it was just like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, actually I can do that. And even speaking to those that think like, oh, I can't do that, it's not my personality. Like I would say, I would recommend read this book, because it really is life changing when you get an idea of like, oh yeah, this is what it's part of the process. That's
and it's
cool.
short, so
yeah. It's like literally like 60 pages. You can read it in a couple hours, and then you'll be all set. And then you can go out and raise all the money you need. Right?
That's right.
No big deal.
You'll be done by dinner.
Right. And then another book is called The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. And it's just great. It just goes through the Bible of understanding that the resources that we do have are not ours. They're all God's. That there is more than enough out there, and it's really great. It really encourages me to realize the fact that hey, I don't have to worry about finances, and it's not just even raising support, but that God is my provider. God is also other people's provider as well, and that He uses people to be able to provide for everything that God is doing. And I love, I'll do the other book in a second, but I love how Mission Increase always, where we go to these workshops, these quarterly workshops, and you're surrounded by all these organizations, and every organization is raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're all in the same area, right? We're all in the Portland area, and it's always mentioned that, hey, look at all this. How cool is that we're all here, and that God is providing for each organization, because that's what God is doing. Each organization represents a vision of what God sees to be possible. Through whatever organization that it might be, which is. It's just amazing. It's always encouraging to go to the workshop, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. We can do this. It's God that's doing it. And then the last book that I would recommend is called The Sower. It says Redefining the Ministry of Raising Kingdom Resources. And this is by Scott Rodin and Gary Hogue. And this just really runs through a great biblical approach to raising kingdom resources. The fact that it is kingdom resources. Again, that kind of saying it over again, but that it's not mine, it's God's, and God gives the resources to us for us to manage. And so Scott and Gary do a great job of kind of showing us how it is that we can do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, missions in itself is something that God could do on His own. Right.
Yeah.
Any kind of ministry, missions, opportunity, God could do it all by Himself, but He has invited us to participate. And then when it comes to the money, He could do it all. He wouldn't need the money, right? But He's created all of this, I think, in a way to show our dependence on Him and our need for Him, and that it's all His work, and we get to participate with Him. And I think when we shift that perspective, like you've been talking about the work we're doing, and about the support that goes along with it, it is freeing, because it's not about us, it's about Him.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if you look throughout the entirety of the Bible, like God rarely ever is just doing something on His own, but He's always looking for people to come alongside Him and what it is that He's doing.
Yeah, to be involved. Well, and I know. So your 1 year volunteer has turned into a little bit longer.
Just a little bit.
Thanks,
just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
You haven't, we've been able to pay you at least a little bit over the last couple of years, but it still probably feels like a volunteer position. But I know something that I've seen in your life that's encouraged me, that's encouraged our ministry, is that your spirit of generosity. Because you go out and raise money or we get a gift or something, and then you'll turn around and hand some of that money off to someone else. I'm like, wait a minute, we just got that money. But then Dan's like, oh, this other ministry and they need this. Or we have a camp next door that, they do a fundraiser each year. And so we give money to them and they give money to us. And it's just exciting to see how money moves around in the kingdom of God and ministries take care of one another.
Yeah, I think it's you think about generosity and the work that God's been doing in my life as He shows me, each and every day that He really is the one that provides. It challenges me as well to be like, well, if that's the case, then I can give this away, not for the sake of like, oh, if I give this away, He's going to give me more, but that He can entrust me with more to give away. Right? So it's not like it's adding to my bank account, right? But it's like, oh, cool. What else can I give to? And as that happens, it becomes this like joyful thing of like, oh, hey, well, let's go give to that because that would be amazing to be able to bless them in this particular area.
Yeah, He can shape our hearts in those ways that help us see that kingdom perspective.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to share the story a couple of years ago, how you as a family were watching God provide for you as a family.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about that story. I was like, do we have time for the story?
We do. We have time for that story.
Yeah, I remember this very, very clearly that, when you have a family and you have children and you work, you get a tax return, right? And for us, it was that year that we volunteered. And so we were doing our taxes and I was excited about the year ahead, and we had plans. I mean, you talk about making plans. Right. My wife Anna had her 30th birthday, and we were going to go to San Francisco. It was our 5-year anniversary. We wanted to go to the Grand Tetons. We wanted to take our family on vacation. We just wanted to do fun things. We were excited about it, and so I sent our tax stuff to our tax person, and we got an interesting message back that we were actually going to receive $0, right? And so, and just kind of give a figure, we thought we were going to get about $4,000 to help us out with our year, and we were going to get nothing because it turns out that when you volunteer,
you don't
make money.
You don't make money. But we were getting paid for like 3 months of that year,
right? But
it wasn't enough to receive anything. And so at first, and I love how God did this because this is like in the beginning, right? This is when I'm learning about fundraising, learning about generosity, provision. And I was like, what is going on here? I mean, we volunteered our time. I mean, we should get this $4,000. And it was very clear that God's like, he kind of like, I was going on a walk and He's like, hey, who is your provider? Right? Really kind of just like put me in check and was like, you're reading all this stuff. You're saying all these things, do you believe it? And I thought, oh man, you got me, And so I went and told Anna, who is just like super generous and just super just like excited about what God wants to do. She's like, well, hey, why don't we go ahead and start keeping track of how it is that God provides for us this year, and see what happens. And I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds cool. And so literally it was the next week at church, somebody comes up to us and say, hey, do you like steak? And we're like, yeah, sure. Oh, I have a gift card for $100 to this steak restaurant. If you'd like it. And so bam, we started writing that down. Even that year, my dad was diagnosed with cancer and he was going to have a surgery. And I was like, oh man, how am I going to get to Texas? We don't have the funds. And then somebody had talked to somebody and that worked for an airlines, and they said, oh, I can get them tickets. And I didn't talk to them. And also, we did not tell anybody that we were doing this, right? That was part of the deal. And then even going to San Francisco, somebody ended up giving us their miles to go to San Francisco. We didn't have to rent a car, but we were able to use a different car. All these things. And even December, at the end of the year in December, the last day, we ended up receiving $60 in the mail that said, I just felt like the Lord wanted to bless you. And so I don't have the number in front of me, but like I said, we were supposed to get $4,000. We ended up getting like $4,450 accumulated over that year. And I was like, wow. I'm like, okay, I think God made His point.
Right.
And I got the message very clearly.
You learned your lesson.
I learned my lesson for sure.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great story, and hopefully that encourages people and reminds people that God really does pay attention, and He knows and He cares.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for your time today, Dan, and for this conversation. And we really just wanted to encourage our listeners on this road of raising support. We will put all of the resources you mentioned in our show notes, and people can find them there and hopefully continue to learn in this journey that missionaries are on, for better or for worse. So learning how to.
It can be a hard road, and it can be a hard road really to trust God, but He's there with us. He's walking with us.
Thanks, guys.
Well, how did you like that interview with Dan?
Yeah, it's just good to talk with Dan. I just love how he was able to share that story at the end, and it just, I think, really depicts how well God has been at work in his life. And I think all of us here at Sanctuary Inn have been growing in this area of trusting God for his provision for Sanctuary Inn. And we often think it's about the money, and it's really not.
Right. Yeah, we often wish for that magical donor that will write that really big check that's going to take care of everything. But it is about getting those people in, bringing people in, getting them involved in the ministry, helping them see the vision, and just knowing that God's put us on their heart. I mean, I'm very humbled when we do, at the end of every summer, we do a fundraising dinner. And for me to be at that dinner and to look around and see so many people I've never met before, but they've heard about the ministry, they're excited about the ministry, and they're there not because of me or because really of any of us, they're because they're friends of friends, and God has brought them there.
Yeah, and I think any missionary who's out there raising support, just God is at work helping you build relationships. He's helping grow you. He's helping to change you, even as you're doing support raising. Yeah,
and it's just not about raising that money. I mean, that is your goal, but in God's economy, He's more concerned about you and your family, and you as a couple, or you as a single, as an individual, and He wants to continue to mold and develop His character in you.
So we hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'd love to hear from you. Any comments or anything on any of these podcasts? We'd love to hear back from our audience. What would be helpful? What are some other topics you might want us to cover? And thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, take a minute and share the Innkeepers podcast with your friends. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for the Innkeepers podcast. Our mission at Sanctuary Inn is to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers. We hope today's podcast was an encouragement to you, or maybe the podcast you heard today, you've been prompted to pass this along to someone you know that could benefit from today's conversation. Creating a podcast is a team effort. Cara and I prepare and do the interviews, and we're grateful for the time that our guests give us out of their busy lives to help us learn more about missionary care.
We want to thank Tim Downing for the music he wrote and performed for the Innkeepers podcast. Tim is a very talented musician, and you can find out more about Tim at downingkeys.com. Our podcast is edited by Javier Bolanos, and our website and show notes are prepared by Micah Githens, my amazing husband. You can visit the Sanctuary Inn website to see more of Micah's great work at sanctuaryinn.org.
Thank you for joining us on our journey to learn more about missionary care.